What's the most hilariously clueless thing a boss has ever said to you? Before we get started, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and turn on the bell so you don't miss future videos. Thanks for the support. I was brand new and one of only 2 women at the company. On my second day, I let my male boss know the toilet wasn't flushing properly and seemed blocked. He called a plumber, and after the plumber cleared the blockage, he called me into his office to yell at me. He tells me the plumber pulled hundreds of tampons out of the pipes, and he knew it must have been me because the pipes weren't blocked before I started. I was so gobsmacked by the complete lack of logic or basic understanding of how the female body works from a married man that the only words I could manage were, but I've only been here 2 days. I told him that like 6 times. He did not understand. I tried to explain the pipes must have already been getting blocked before I started, but he didn't believe me and said I should consider myself lucky they weren't sending me the bill. The other woman just flat out denied flushing anything that shouldn't be flushed and let me take all the heat. And no, I have never flushed any tampons ever, let alone at work. Next story. I asked my supervisor what was the max amount of mandatory OT, which was new to me in 36 years of working, was allowed according to state labor law. She responded with, "We are a private company. We don't follow state law." Next story. Your only job is to make me look good. After asking for role clarity and a list of my responsibilities, rather than just doing my boss's job for him. I didn't hire you to tell me how it is. You're here to agree with me. After I told him in private that something he claimed was a fact was not true. If they can't read, they deserve whatever happens. After I raised a concern that writing the phrase, "Take care of yourself and pay attention to what you're doing," at the end of every step in a work instruction wasn't going to make the work any safer if people didn't have the right equipment. He was a safety manager. I still need you to come in today. After me calling from overseas, where I was stranded for days due to volcanic ash causing my flight to be canceled. I can go on. Next story? I've told this anecdote a couple of times already here, on Reddit. Here it goes. I was working at an office, the client's office. There were around 70 people in that space from my company, and more from other companies. There were people there 24/7. At one point in time, the client started renovating the space without relocating any of us. I warned my bosses that this was not safe. I was a union member of the safety board of our company. He told me that everything was under control. A few weeks later, when I arrived, I saw that everybody was in the hallway. I asked what was going on, and they told me that a ceiling lamp had fallen on top of the desk of someone who, luckily, had gone for a coffee. Nobody was hurt. I entered the office to call my boss. You have to call the other boss because I'm on holidays. I called the other boss and told him what had happened. Then, I called the head of the safety board of our company to inform him as well. And now, for the good part. The second boss berated me for 1. Not expressing the urgency of the situation. It was literally the first and only time I had called him. 2. Not inform him of the risks of the renovation project, which I had done. 3. Informing the head of the safety board without reason. Someone nearly got hurt. That's the dumbest crap I heard any boss say in 20 years. Anyway, we were relocated for the duration of the renovation project. Next story. When I asked for more staff and she said no because of budget reasons, and topped it off with, "There's always going to be more work than employees," which is true in a way, of course. However, not replacing meant I would soon have only work and no employees. I got my recruiter in the end. Next story. It's not mandatory, it's compulsory. A deeply stupid man, too stupid to know he was stupid. He was also an aggressive bully, absolutely stealing a living. He's been promoted again since I worked with him. We looked forward to the days he was off because everything ran smoothly without him. Next story. The company needs to manage IT budget and security compliance instead of anything innovative. I'm a technical founder, high-skilled. I build stuff and tell great stories to our customers. Run dev teams. Forward-thinking, lead by bringing up kind of thing. We had some crap happen at our company, and lots of heads were reduced. Of course I can do the job. I did build it up after all. But this is not who I am and where I want to be in my career. They find out, probably know that I quit. Found somewhere better suited for who I am. Next story. We've decided to retrench your team because it is cheaper to restructure and outsource. CEO ignores fact that 40 staff in 2 states he's signed off on retrenching have plus 250 years of collective experience in international stock market forecasting and have one-on-one personal relationships with our entire customer base built up over years of trusted business advice. We think the company will be dead in under 3 years. Next story. About a week after my boss, manager of a bookstore, came back from maternity leave, she started leaving early so that we were always left one short. She would say, "I just have to ask myself, would I rather be here or home with my baby?" Where did she think the rest of us would rather be, home or work? The chain ran a competition between stores, and she urged us all to do our part so that she could win a microwave. For her home, not for the store. I was a part-time worker and a full-time graduate student, so as the end of the term neared, I had a tighter schedule, as I first had to write my own final papers, and then grade my undergraduate's final exams. Since it was Christmas season, my boss wanted me to come in for a lot of extra shifts. When I told her I couldn't, due to my school responsibilities, she said, "You're going to have to get your priorities straight. Which is more important, school or work?" I just stared at her. Next story. I never worked more than 5 days a week. All the bosses knew this. One manager called me anyway to ask to work a 6th day. I refused, saying I don't work more than 5 days. He told me, "But you're lucky you have 2 days leave in a row, Tuesday and Wednesday. But if I come in, I won't anymore." Silence. Damn idiot. Next story. On my 2nd day of work, I walked up to my boss to get a better fitting uniform shirt, from size L to M, while holding a small bag of chips, and he said, "You're going to need that large after your snack," basically calling me fat. Thanks, boss. Next story. I can't afford to spend any more on this project. Can you volunteer your time to finish it? It's for a good cause. The man drove a Porsche, and it was his own personal vanity project. Next story. Let's take a minute to applaud and be thankful that our CEO, Chris, small company around 30, is treating us to the work conference in Vegas, and he is even paying for the rooms. At Circus, which you have to share with a coworker, but this will allow for bonding time. Thank you, Chris, for doing this on his own dime. Trade show manned 12 hours a day, so this wasn't an exciting moment for us to trudge the hell on foot all the way from Circus to the trade show far away while having no privacy and having to thumbs up and pretending it was spectacular. And thank you so much. Next story. 1. Had 2 days booked off for a medical procedure. I was admitted to the hospital for the first day, and second day I was legally impaired due to drugs they gave me, so couldn't work. After my attendance review, my boss said, "Let's work on keeping these days down." 2. My boss said, "Don't worry, you'll still have a job. You're union." Next story. I had a coworker who managed the mailroom for a company take time off for cancer treatments. I was asked to step in and manage during that time. I had a vague notion of what was done, but wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. This company managed class action lawsuits, and there was little wiggle room when it comes to legal matters. However, no process or procedure was officially documented. I did know that an employee had been assigned to do so at one point, so I asked her for notes even if they weren't approved. I thought this was reasonable, and I would at least not miss any tasks I was unaware had to be done. Our respected owner had recently passed, and the new guy called me into his office when he heard what I asked for. He told me, "You don't need notes, just follow your gut." I play poker for a hobby, and keeping my face unresponsive when he said that was one of my proudest moments. Next story. This goes back about 30 years, but the first time my former boss encountered homeless people, his reaction was, "I don't understand. Why don't they just get jobs?" Next story. I was hired as an RN care manager for an agency. My position was private pay only. We did not take insurance payments for my work. I got my first client, with whom I spent 5 hours the first day I met with them. The next day, the supervisor chewed me out for spending 5 hours when the limit was 2 hours for Medicare patients. I had to explain to her that this was a private pay patient, and she should be happy that I spent 5 hours of reimbursable time. Next story. My colleague and I were discussing our salary and pay rises with my then boss. My colleague explained that her rent has gone up and she's struggling to afford it. My then boss went, "Why don't you just buy a house?" Next story. My boss wanted me to mother his new employee. No, not only train him, but making sure that he is taking notes, asks questions, actually read our training material. Mind you, he's 40 plus, not a young man who just finished school. I told my boss that I only have one child. Next story. These are all from the same boss. Early in my career, while I was working as a receptionist. "I need you to move your computer so that you face away from the door. The cables coming out of the back of your monitor are ugly and shouldn't be what people see when they come to our office. On a fun note, this gave one of the very senior, very distinguished gentlemen higher-ups the idea that he should see how far he could get into the office without me seeing him. That man, in his tweed suit, tiptoeing through the office trying to scare me, is one of my fondest memories of that job. It's unprofessional for you to wear a skirt without pantyhose. Take some money from petty cash and go buy some. Yeah, no, I'm not going to steal money from the company because you have outdated ideas about how women should dress. She gave me a contract and asked me to find a way for us not to pay. I looked through the contract and let her know that the other company delivered on everything we purchased, and that just because we opted not to use what we purchased didn't mean we didn't have to pay for it. I'm not paying you to tell me we need to pay them. I asked you to find me a loophole. This is a good opportunity for you. You're always disagreeing with me. This is a great opportunity to put your talents to use. Maybe you could be a lawyer. Next story. I was recently reminded of this. A budget shortfall plus grant mismanagement was happening, and my boss suggested that I just pause my work for 2 months while they figure things out. To her credit, she was floating the idea and wanted my input. Thus, I got to explain to an actual adult human that not being paid for 2 months would be, checks notes, really bad. Next story. You aren't fully flexible if you aren't available to cover on your scheduled days off. She fully expected me to wait at home in case I was called in. A minimum wage till worker. Like, no, my days off are for me. Next story. We have decided, this very week without informing anyone, that overtime has to be approved. So that 70 hours you all did does not count, and we're not paying any overtime this week. So I let the director know that I was implementing work to rule and not supporting the entire team as I had been. I was just doing my lighting tasks and then going home. We got paid overtime. However, he was so dismissive, rude, and condescending about wanting money that was contractually owed to us that I put in my notice the next week. I specifically stated in my notice that it was due to his poor conduct. Next story. That she was too old to change who she was as a person, so I would have to change who I was as a person so we could get along better. That was my clarity moment of, it wasn't me, it was her. She was a lunatic, and matter what I did, she would never be happy with me, so I was done trying to make her happy. Next story. A girl at our work lost her grandma and was crying while working. I informed the manager, who said, "My sister has cancer and I'm not crying." I couldn't believe it and told him what I thought. Unbelievable. Next story. After, as an employee of about 5 years, being passed over for a promotion in favor of a guy who had been hired only months earlier, you'll need to hold his hand a bit until he gets up to speed. Next story. He said about W-9s being required to set up a new vendor for payment. It's just a suggestion. They're not required. The IRS would like a word. Ugh. Next story. Not said, but I had one boss who was so stupid he literally tried to open a jar with a potentially rabid bat in it to get a better look at it. It was supposed to be dead, but the guy who brought it in wasn't sure. Everybody shouted at him not to do it. And finally, he came to his senses and stopped right before he opened it all the way. Oh, and he couldn't count change either, and had to have other people do quarter rolls for him. That guy was such a moron. Next story. My boss comes out with stuff all the time. He told me he used to be a therapist at a local company that my brother-in-law was quite high up in. I rang my brother-in-law. He had not heard of my boss and said we don't have therapists here. He always tells people things about his life that are literally scenes from famous films. He's delusional. Next story. Baby shower for someone going on maternity leave. Canada allows for up to 18 months off with partial benefits. Not fully paid, but job will be there when you return. Manager of a different team joked, "If you're on my team, better not get pregnant anytime soon." I think they realized that was a horrible thing to say and rushed to clarify they were just joking. Next story. I think my favorite is as follows. I have more that are so random, but this one still sits in my brain rent-free. My computer screens won't turn on. I press the power button on the computer and watch screens turn on. I did that and nothing happened, walking away and confused that that just happened. Next story. You don't need to listen to what the customer wants. You give them what they need. I matched colors for a paint shop and was waiting for a customer to bring me a sample of a color they wanted. Next story. My boss asked me to create the site calendar. They wanted me to break the annual calendar into 3 18-week trimesters. A bit of basic math shows why that is stupid. When I pointed it out, They threaten me with insubordination. Next story. I like you better when you're crying. I'm farther along spiritually than you. Both said on separate occasions by my boss at CAP. She was hired a few years after me and liked to lord it over me. Next story. In an email from a dictator-type manager. It's the inmates running the zoo around here. A coworker printed it out and hung it up, and he never understood the irony. Next story. A manager at a retail store I worked at as a teen asked me to babysit her kid one day. I said sure, no problem. Then she said I'd have to take the kid to my house because I was a stranger and not allowed in her house. Like, if I'm a stranger, aren't you more worried about me having control over your actual child than what I can snoop or steal at your house? Make it make sense. I declined her request by saying my mom said I can't bring strange kids to our house. Next story. My old manager would get flustered sometimes and start talking too fast for his mind to keep up. When he needed something done fast, it was, "Can you do this ASP?" Next story. One time, my supervisor came in and dropped off some blueprints for something he needs me to program the CNC for. 5 minutes later, my boss comes stomping in screaming at me, "Why isn't the job finished yet? It was supposed to be done 2 weeks ago." I was confused and said, "But my supervisor just gave it to me 5 minutes ago." He immediately calmed down and said, "Yeah, he told me he forgot to give it to you." Then I said, "So what are you screaming at me for?" And then he just left. I also manage our Amazon store, and the warehouse told me we are out of stock on an item, so I set our quantity to 0. A few days later, I get an order for that item, and I was thinking, did I forget to change the inventory? I cancel the order and set the inventory to 0 again. Then it happened again, and I went to my boss and asked him if he was the one that added inventory to that item, and he said yes. I told him that the warehouse said we are out of stock on that item, and left, thinking that he just didn't know it was out of stock, so that should be the end of it. Then it happened again, and I asked him if he added more, and he said no. I was really confused, because a fake, only him and I have access to the Amazon store login. So I asked him, did he assign anyone else to work on Amazon? And he said he don't know. I was thinking, what do you mean you don't know? But I then told all of my coworkers that item is out of stock, and if they had access to the Amazon store to not add anymore. It happened again, and I went to my boss and told him Amazon has a cancellation rate metric. If we cancel any more orders, our account can be suspended, so don't add any more stock. My boss said, "No, we have to sell." And I said, "It's out of stock. There's nothing for us to sell." This happened 3 more times, and our Amazon account got suspended. Next story. When I first began my professional career, I worked office temp jobs to bulk up my resume. One of them being administrative assistant work at a CSI firm. One time, I returned from the bathroom to the office manager at my cubicle. Her, "One of the engineers needed your help, and you weren't at your desk." Me, "I'm so sorry, I was in the restroom." Her, "You weren't at your desk." Me, a little confused. Yes, I was in the bathroom." Then she walked away. Am I not allowed to go to the bathroom? Was this her way of telling me something illegal? Lol. It's funny looking back and being at a solid job where we are free to come and go. Next story. Got reprimanded because of doing too much overtime, and that's strictly forbidden. For real, I could face disciplinary actions for it. When my workload got back to normal and overtime was no longer needed, I promptly got 2 new projects to handle. Respecting the deadline whilst providing qualitative work meant doing overtime again. My boss's reply? Just make sure you're logged off on Teams and program your mails to leave at 8 a.m. next day. Next story. Are you interested in the trainings? The ones that are relevant, of course, but we'll talk about them as they come up. Well, just so you know, I can still make you go to stuff. Well, if something is mandatory, just let me know that I need to go. If you ask my opinion, then take away the choice. It's just going to confuse me. Well, some of them will be up to you. Dog, just make up your mind. Next story. Me and 2 other somewhat new software developers. Boss, this is very important. It needs to be done before Monday, so it looks like we need to work over the weekend. Insert inspiring speech about how we all lift each other and the business up. Team, okay, let's get this done. Boss, all right, great teamwork. If you need me, you may need try a couple of times. Coverage isn't great on the lake. Next story. Boss, after I turned in my resignation, I never knew how to manage you. I couldn't make you cry. I made all the others cry, even the men, but I could never make you cry. Of course she made me cry, but not in front of her. I would go home and bawl. She made me cry my first week, and I vowed she would never make me cry publicly again. I guess she forgot. Next story, Normie, my mum. She was the secretary for a union office. Every year, the union reps got to go on an R&R trip somewhere awesome, like Hawaii. When they got back, Mum asked how their holiday was. They snapped, "It wasn't a holiday, it was R&R." Next story, got in an argument with my boss, and he told me to go home. On the way out, he said, "Don't bother coming back." Went out and got drunk and slept in. Woke up with a couple of missed calls and a text saying, "Where are you?" Next story, I'm getting a little tired of hearing how nice you are. I want you to pull it back a bit. People need to see that I'm nice too. I really had to try not to laugh. The irony of it all. She was not a nice person. Next story. I worked on a complicated IT system at the time. We had a problem, due them being very old computers, with all the limitations of computers from the 1970s. Anyway, with the help of the IT support group, tech support for the programmers like me, they were very techy. I had the system working okay most of the time, but we were always looking for a better way to do it. Meeting on the subject got very techy, very fast. And the manager always sat in and tried to contribute. Anyway, every couple of weeks he would call me into his office and say, "I think I have an idea of how to fix the memory fragmentation problem." He did it for many months and never once said anything useful. But every time, I would have to patiently explain why this brilliant idea, that his chief programmer and the senior techie people and the manufacturer's techie people had missed, was not going to work. Next story. When I had a health issue with my liver and confided in my boss about it, even though I hated her because I wanted her to be informed, to comfort me, she took my hand and said, "You'll be fine. That's why God gave us two or everything." I almost laughed because it was like, do you not know the absolute basics of human anatomy? Also, on an email thread where she was emailing IT about an issue, but completely missing the mark as to how to address it. So she was basically asking for one thing, but needing something else entirely. I responded to everyone, eventually explaining what the actual issue was and how to address it, and indicated what she was talking about was irrelevant. To which she responded back to everyone, "Well, irrelevant, yes, but..." I forget what her validation was, but it was like, good lord. Next story. I had been creating and sending monthly reports to my boss for years. He was middle manager, and we started reporting to a director, so I just started sending the reports to him. Director called me into his office and said, he was surprised I was sending him the reports. I said, well, I was sending them to the old boss, but figured I'd just send them directly to the new boss. Director said, you've been doing these? I said, yes, for years. He said, well, what was I paying old boss for? I said, beats me? I did most of his work. I just figured he forwarded them to you, and you knew I did. Of course, no raise for me. Next story. I worked retail at a department store, in the treadmill department. The corporate office sent a floor plan of how the treadmills were to be displayed, but it included more square footage than our store actually had. So, I complained to my manager that there was literally no room to put all of these treadmills. Physically, it was impossible. Uh-huh, she said. Just do it. And she left. And then of course she complained later that I didn't follow instructions, because I didn't change the laws of physics to make our store larger than it was. Next story. In response to my telling him that we needed to rationalize how many recurring meetings we were having with the team because their frustration levels with the ridiculous number of meetings we had were high. Yeah, that's how it is here. You spend all day in meetings and then do your real job at night. On a different note, I had a boss ask me where I was when JFK was killed. I was minus 15 years old. For clarity, I look younger than I am, so it wasn't even a situation where I just looked older. The whole question didn't make sense. Next story. You have too much annual leave. That's why you can't take it. Not the fact that they were chronically understaffed, and we'd all been working unpaid overtime to cover each other's shifts for emergencies, planned trips, and sickness, and unable to claim back the time we were owed or our actual holiday entitlement. Followed by, don't you know how lucky you are to work here? We were all chronically ill from poor working conditions, burnt out from all the hours, and lack of support from management and on minimum wage. We sure felt lucky. Next story. Even if my ideas aren't the best ideas, I still expect everyone to do them because I'm the boss here. I wouldn't mind this so much if my idiot manager's bad ideas resulted in mountains of pointless work for her, not me. She would just throw crap at a wall, take credit for the tiny smears that stuck, and then made her staff clean the rest of the mess up. Kiss my ass, Pendar. The look on your face when I told you I'm resigning because you don't deserve my labor is the only good memory of working for you. Next story. There's an event that happens every August, and this year I was asking some of the higher-ups if they would be available on X date in August for this event. The event is a big deal, and all of these higher-ups have to present at it. I asked the highest boss, "Hey, are you available this day in August?" And he said, "Why are you planning this so early? Just do what the day before like we always do." He has no idea that everyone has always been starting to plan this August event in the middle of April. Next story. Me. Which large commitment task gets priority? A or B? Only one is going to get done this week. Boss. Both. Me. If I swap between tasks, both will only be done by end of next week. Boss. Both of them are top priority. Also, don't forget that properly documenting these is also needed. Me. Chooses task A, next week does task B, and documents both after completion. Months later during review. Boss. You need to work on your prioritization skills. Next story. I got berated by a boss once for not answering my personal mobile phone to him. A. I was driving on a motorway at the time, and this was before hands-free Bluetooth was a thing. B. I was on leave at the time. The emergency he was calling about was how to do a search on our mail gateway. He could have looked the answer up online, or, called the company that we had a support and maintenance contract with that he had signed. Next story. So this story isn't about me, but about a coworker. I was working in a CGA accounting firm. We had a new CGA student join our firm. This lady had her CFA designation. She earned it while working 70 hours a week working on the floor of the TSE. Needless to say, it's a difficult designation to earn. She was having a hard time understanding one thing, and our boss looked at her and said, "Wow, do you have a learning disability?" Next story. Well, I was telling my very wealthy boss about a student I'm mentoring who lives with her entire family in Texas, in areas that were constantly being flooded, messed up by weather, losing power for days, etc. He literally asked me, "Why do they keep living there?" I was like, very gently, "So, sometimes people don't have a lot of money, and that can make it hard to do things like find a new house for your family of 7. Next story. "Can you run some training next week?" said to me on my last day before starting my maternity leave, just after saying how he wished me well for the conclusion of my pregnancy, etc. I responded that HR is literally blocking my access because it's illegal for me to work while on mat leave. And he was a nice person. I just legit think he was panicking about all the work and didn't think. Next story. I once took on training new hires as a responsibility on top of my regular insurance sales job that I had. Then they added onboarding too. I asked for a raise for taking on the training and onboarding responsibilities on top of the sales job I was hired for, and they said no. Then my boss was surprised when I put my 2 weeks in, because I found another job. Next story. My team deals with multiple stakeholders who select products we sell. If I told you how many different times we had to explain why a name was a commonly known derogatory term for a specific culture, you'd laugh your ass off. It's a bunch of privileged white women who probably haven't ever been outside of their bubble. Next story. We don't have feelings here, we only have rules. I had just started there and thought she was joking, but she was dead serious. 10 years later, whenever I have a day where I have to work directly with her, my husband asks me, "Were you allowed to have any feelings today?" Thank God she is retiring this year. Next story. On a Zoom call with 50-odd people about a major system migration, I pointed out a bunch of accounts were in limbo, meaning we couldn't book jobs on the old or the new system to trigger the workflow to get things picked up. The project lead said, "Just figure it out." Wow, thank you. So helpful. Next story. I was discussing ironing with a coworker, and the state director said, "You guys like ironing too much. Just send it out to a lady." Mate, I hate ironing. I am the lady. This week he was complaining about tax on super over 3 mil. I wish I had his problems. Next story. President of a financial institution that underpaid workers. I wish the ATM in our building would give out $100 bills. I mean, who wants to walk around with all those 20s in your pocket? He said this from the podium of a company-wide meeting. Next story. We don't allow our admin team to use spreadsheets to keep the information organized. We stop what we are doing every single time to track down the manager to ask her every question we have. Being self-sufficient is not allowed. Next story. I had my supervisor come up to jerk at me about slacking off while I was literally running bolts into the unit I was working on with my impact driver. I literally had to stop working so I could hear her tell me I wasn't working. Next story. Look at how great you're doing and holding on. That 6-year industry seasoned employee hired after you count Hackett, but you're still doing it. I don't think they realize that's not a compliment, but show how horrid the job is. Next story. I am moving teams within my company, which means I will be moving about 15 steps away from my current team. When my TL found out when my last day was, she said, "Well, it was nice knowing you," just to show how much she cares. Next story. Nobody needs an extra monitor in their home office anymore, since all the work is done on tablets anyway. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the Minister of Labor in Finland. Yes, the job market is unsurprised crashing. Next story. Not got many like that, but I constantly have issues with, why are you doing it that way? Well, boss, it's how the SOP says to do it. We changed the process. Well, no jerk told me, mate. Rinse, repeat, etc. Next story. I just caused my first workplace conflict as the manager, she said, and followed it up with, but I can't tell you anything about it. Me just sitting there confused why she's bragging about this. Next story. I wish you had told me you were looking for another job. Yeah, current company is literally going bust. You didn't think we'd all be looking to get off this stinking, sinking ship? Next story. We will soon be printing less quantity, so it will be cheaper. That's the opposite of how printing works. The confusion on the supplier's face was priceless, but they held it in. Next story. Worked for a guy who screamed at me, "I don't need a bookkeeper. I've worked for years without a bookkeeper. I need someone to help me think." He hired me because I'm a bookkeeper. Next story. My former boss got mad at me for some misalignment with external stakeholders during my week 3, while I was still onboarding. And mind you, she didn't do a proper intro/handover. Next story. I was off on an unpaid leave recently, and he chose not to do any work while I was gone because he said, "If she isn't going to work, then I won't either." Next story. You just love bringing me problems. No, I just don't want to be held accountable when it goes to crap, and it was 3 people before me who messed up. Next story. You're too nice. After the 4th time I quipped back, "No, you're confusing me being too nice with apathy." Needless to say, I no longer work there. Next story. Hilarious one here in the ironworker trade. My boss was very high on himself. We'll call him the GF, General Foreman. So we got all the steel erected in good time, somehow, because this man couldn't organize a thing, not one thing, and we all wanted to make him look bad. So as I said, the steel it up and bolt it in tight. Great. Now it's time to start laying decking. The decking is what sits on the roof, so concrete can be poured eventually. It comes coffee time, so we all go down to our shack/coffee room, and we see this GF, our fearless leader, on frickin' YouTube trying to figure out how to lay decking down. The guy had no idea. We all quietly laughed at him because he was rated up psycho and no one wanted confrontation, also not very smart to begin with. So we got back up on the roof of this building that's 320 feet in the sky. And with the help of everyone coming together, we obviously figured it out. This was the easiest part we come to find. Now we have to weld studs, the concrete bonds to all of these studs to secure good form and stability of the building. The GF brings up these awesome new things that you just put it in and shoot her down. Down. Get it done, you guys will be done in no time. Hurry up. This is weldable primer, he says. 3 of us go hard to get all these studs done in one day. Inspector comes, 90% fail. And that's all because the GF ordered weldable primer, which there is no such thing with these guns we had, and the inspector made sure he knew that. Girlfriend was fuming. We spent days and days manually welding all these studs into place because of the boss's complete incompetence. And the kicker, he never got let go until the job was completed. Insane. They kept him around. Still my favorite job of my life, as it's an icon in Saskatchewan that I can say I built. But damn, who we had running the show was a joke. Nobody even listened to him most of the time, and we can say we built it as a team with no leadership. Proud of that. Next story. I used to be a banker for a large and well-known financial institution that's been around for a very long time, with a stagecoach as its logo. My manager was your typical scatterbrained, full of himself jerk that nobody really liked. He was, however, extremely good-looking, so he got away with absolutely everything, to say the least. I'd mentioned to him that we were running low on supplies. From Post-it notes and pens, business cards, even coffee, chocolates in a bowl on our desks, and microwave popcorn, which customers absolutely loved, by the way, copier paper, envelopes, and also really super important banking materials, which we definitely needed on a daily basis, such as signature cards, new account books, checkbook covers, and temporary ATM cards, etc. He told me I was hereby in charge of doing the ordering stuff for the entire branch. One day, after he'd returned from his usual 3-hour lunch, he asked how things were going. This is how the conversation went, verbatim. "Well," I said, "we finally received the starter checks and new account kits we need to, open new accounts." "Sounds good." They arrived just in time, because we were down to the last one, which is insane and would have shut down the branch. With a line of college students looking to open new checking accounts, it was a close call. Yeah, good. "Hey, did you make sure to order enough of that candy that I like?" It was like this every single day. Next story. I was evaluating a manager who kept hiring complete duds of help desk flunkies, only to fire them at 90 days. Most of these guys were warm bodies that I suspected were hired to not be a threat to him. I asked him, "Why didn't you hire Wendy? She was qualified for the job, but she said you never called her back." He sighed, like that kind of sigh when you have to explain something difficult to a child. "Women are complicated," he explained. "We have clients who come visit and have to maintain a professional decorum. I can't have some tech back here weeping with tampons scattered all over the desk." He fired techs after giving them an exam of his own making at the end of his 90-day probationary period. He refused to let us see this exam. We eventually got a copy, and it was one of those fill-in-the-blank tests with some really shitty questions that any answer could be subject to interpretation. So we gave him his own exam. He failed, mostly because he said the questions were beneath him and refused to answer a lot of them. How can you grade your own exam if the questions are beneath you? He refused to answer that, saying it would jeopardize the integrity of the exam. Yeah, he was let go. Next story. Started working at a small chain family restaurant, similar to Applebee's. Was a line cook and had been in restaurants for a very long time. There was a locked closet with expensive supplies which we would need to get, and manager had keys. I got the key from the manager, opened the closet for what I needed, and noticed a stack of circular slicer blades. There were 10. I handed the keys back to the manager and asked about the blades. He said, in a very sarcastic tone, "Well, you see, when you use the slicer to cut things, it gets dull, and we have to replace the blades when this happens." I said, "Follow me." I took him over to the slicer, which hadn't been used yet, and showed him how to sharpen the slicer, which took all of 15 seconds. He stood there, mouth open, not knowing what to say. He had been changing the blades once a month. Pretty much all commercial slicers have a built-in sharpener. I said after showing him how to sharpen the blades that the current blade would probably last years. In the 20 years I worked in restaurants, I have never seen a slicer blade replaced. Next story. I was trying to get a company car registered. Mind you, they'd already had it for 3 years unregistered, but the title transfer wasn't filled out properly. Told boss, and asked if I could leave early one day to go to the dealership over an hour away, on my own dime, mind you, to get the title fixed. He honestly could not understand why A, we even needed to register, B, why I would need to get the physical title fixed, and instead told me to scan it and send to the dealership. I tried desperately to explain that the physical piece of paper known as the title is a legal document and has to be properly filled out to get the registration so we could legally drive the car. He even suggested I just forge the new signature. I am a certified notary, and got fussy when I said I wasn't comfortable with that. Finally got told, "Fine, that doesn't make any sense, but I guess just do it." After an hour and 3 other people explaining the situation to him. So glad I don't work there anymore. Next story. That you can't discuss your pay because it is illegal to do so under state law. I corrected him at once, and then he's like, "Well, the handbook for the company says you can't. It's company rules," while he's getting redder and redder. "Well, Mark, that's nice, but I have that as well, and you're lying to me," I replied. He says, "Well, the handbook has been updated on that page." This is a gas station / convenience store, which makes it extra weird. So I said, "You need to give me a copy of the new one then." Obviously, I never got the updated version because he was talking out of his rear. I quit after my only sister died suddenly, and he put me on the do not rehire list, and I'm convinced it's because of that. Or another incident that was very similar. I had an above-average score overall, didn't steal, which is kind of common at gas stations, and I actually showed up when I was supposed to be there. He did me a favor, honestly. The heck with the whole company. Next story. I had a boss who was only there because she was the boss's bestie's spouse. We butted heads because she wouldn't let me clean the flat top properly. Her way? Get it hot, take a wet rag, scrape stuff off, that's it. My way was to wipe and scrape, as well as using a grill brick or grill cleaner. The last step should always be sanitation. Well, I bypassed her, bought my own grill brick, and started using it for closing shifts. One day, I showed up, and it's gone. Boss's boss, the owner, pulls me into his office, berates me for going against his manager. I'm there to follow rules, not make them. She went to culinary school, and I didn't. This was a woman who bragged about not being able to hold jobs because she didn't like their rules. He finished by telling me, if we really wanted to work, we never would have hired you in the first place. Then he told me to get out of his office. I put in my 2 weeks the next day. Next story. Somewhere around 2017, I was managing a team of trainers at a call center with very high turnover due to low wages and high competition from fast food. I know. Oof. Anyway, I was talking with the site director who ran the entire location, whom I only had a dotted line relationship to. Training was an HR function and had decentralized leadership, multinational call center company with well over 100K employees. We were discussing turnover, and I had some ideas, and she stopped me, looked me dead in the eye, and said the following. Your job isn't to innovate or be creative. Your job is to execute the processes outlined in our global operation model without exception. I left that job not long after, got headhunted into a new gig with better pay, who valued innovation and creativity. Within a year, I saw that site director interviewing with our COO, and oh boy did I assassinate her career. Next story. I worked at my mother's fish market as a teen and in my early 20s. One of my big jobs was driving to North Jersey to buy live crabs off the docks from the crabbers. It was an important job, as crab sales was easily a third of the overall income, maybe even half. Being private fishermen, they exclusively wanted to be paid in cash. So I would routinely have 10 to 20K in cash on me to buy said crabs. Being a family business, one of my uncles ran the fresh fish department and was de facto my boss. Every trip, 3 to 5 hours, he would go on a long spiel of how I had to drive safe, and to take my time, but hurry up. Logical fallacies never really dawned on this particular relative. God bless him. He's been a successful businessman despite himself. Like the time he told me, if a lobster can breathe underwater, they can breathe through plastic. It was always a fun time on 9th Street. Next story. My desk was against and faced a window that faced east, that only had light gray mesh blinds that didn't do much to block the sun. The sun shined directly in my eyes and face all morning. It was hard to see my computer screen, and it heated me up so much that I would be sweating. I let my boss know this multiple times, and requested to move to another desk or to get solid blinds that blocked the sun. I don't know if she was some sadist or what, but she did not think this was an important issue. One day she finally said if the glare was bothering me, I could switch desks. I point blank said to her it's not glare. It's the actual sun in my eyes for 3 hours. She just looked at me and didn't say anything. I was finally able to move to a new desk away from a window. The next person who sat there complained about the same thing. What is wrong with people? Next story. I once volunteered forward place with high turnover, especially among the female staff. It quickly became apparent that it was because of the manager. He was both creepy and utterly incompetent. One day, after 3 members of his 4-staff team had resigned, he talked to me about applying for one of the open positions. He both made it seem like I wasn't qualified because I'd have to literally do everything until other people had been hired, and like he really wanted me to apply. When I said something about the platform, think SharePoint, they were all using for literally every task, he looked at me blankly, asked me what it was, and if I could show him how to use it. He had been working there for over a year, and I, a volunteer, had to show him how to do his job. No idea what he had been doing up until this point to make himself look busy. Next story. Back before the internet took off, we used to use actual mail, or faxes, to send important documents like invoices, etc. Boss was pissed off because a customer in Europe had not paid their bills, and had the audacity to say they never got their invoices. And then the first invoices were returned. One of the bosses stuck them in a FedEx envelope, hand-wrote the address, because we didn't have a FedEx terminal back then, and sent them ultra stupid overnight, $70, despite the envelopes having a big red stamp that said wrong address. The sales rep had used Denmark, the Netherlands, as the country. The whole Boss network approved this customer's details, including their address, before the sale was completed, so I guess they just didn't even look. The dumb thing the boss said was, "What do you mean? Those are different countries." Next story. Boss, we feel like you're losing interest in your role, so we're going to shift you to a different department since someone else expressed interest in your role. Okay. I actually really like my job, and this is out of left field. Boss, it'll be fun. Okay, I've already been in that department, but okay. Boss, it's been a month since you switched departments. How are you liking it? Not as much as my previous department, and especially not all the extra meetings. Boss, I hear ya. Let's schedule a weekly check-in to see how you're doing. Boss, switches to daily meetings to keep me interested. Resignation. Boss, this is so unexpected. I went from enjoying my job to you making me have daily engagement meetings to make sure I want to stay here, and it did the opposite. Bye. Next story. Worked a job where we were on call a week at a time. I quote the words because we were always on call. It's just you were the one who answered the phone when they rung, and if things belonged to you, they handed it off to you. There was a big discussion about not answering the phone when on call. I admitted that I sometimes slept heavy, and I might not in the future, wake up on the first call, and that whomever is calling should call more than once. Even on full volume, I might sleep through the few rings before email picks up. The response was, "That's not acceptable." Like, what the heck? How do I control myself when sleeping? To which I deadpanned, looked her in the eye and said, "Maybe you can tell that to the sleeping me so that he can wake me up when the phone rings." Next story. Ran an engineering department. One of the people under my supervision happened to be related to the boss. That being said, his work sucked and was actively costing the company money. I wasn't reprimanding him, but I would point out things and suggest improvements, and I am talking like once a month kind of thing, not daily. He apparently did not like it and went running to the boss. Boss called me in with that guy to work things out. After some chit-chat about the issues, my boss said, "Maybe you are trying to do too good of a job." I laughed and said, "You want me to do a bad job?" He thought I was being flippant. I assured him I was not. After a little bit of clarification, I quit. Funny part is, 3 of my people quit within 2 weeks. That relative lost his job. Good times. Next story. Former boss complaining about his business trip to Colorado in the middle of a gosh darn blizzard, and forget to inform himself that check-in time was later than he expected, so he had to spend 2 hours in the lobby. The front doors opened right into the lobby. Who does that? This guy was on a whole nether level. Completely entitled, thought he was country club but the cheapest man in existence. Hired me for things he could do way faster himself instead of explaining his super complicated version of it to me. Hired me to answer the phone and handle walk-ins. No one ever called, and our only walk-in was someone who got lost in the weirdly complicated strip mall. Also, he was definitely embezzling. Boy, I still hate that man almost 20 years later. Next story. Sometimes, as adults, we have to do things we don't want to do. I worked in retail at an independent hardware store. The store owner's son, Junior, was responsible for the schedule and had given me 10 days straight, 1 day off, and 11 days on, which would give me overtime. A was huge no at this crap place. I told him that he had given me OT and I was tired from working so much. That's when he said the above. 4 weeks later, I get talked to about the OT. They asked me why I didn't bring it up to Junior, who wrote the schedule. I told them I did. Junior told me the above. Apparently, you could hear Daddy ripping Junior a new asshole over 8 hours of OT. Junior couldn't write a schedule to save his life, even with scheduling software. Next story. My boss always asks stupid or silly questions. One day we are working me 2 office assistants, HR, and financial controller, me being safety. She shouts out from across the office. "Razor Wolf, is it safe to watch the welders work on the security camera? Never mind the fact where we live. It's illegal to use security systems to monitor productivity." I was not fazed, didn't even look up, just responded, "Yep, that's fine." She closes her door. I hear chairs creaking. The 2 assistants and HR girl come over to the office I share with financial controller. They are all staring at me, asking if that's a normal question for her to ask, and I confirm that yes it is. Then shared some of the other things I have been asked. Next story. I work at a record label. one day of a recording session with my boss, who's the sound engineer. I'm planning on going straight from the session to a gig with some friends, but realize I've left my earplugs in my hotel room. We're in a different city for the session. I said something like, "Damn, I'll have to buy some crap earplugs from a pharmacy on the way." And my boss, who's been a producer and sound engineer for decades, and I'm pretty sure understands the importance of ear health and hygiene and protecting your hearing, said, "I don't get it. What's the point of going to a gig if you can't hear it?" Not as wild as some of the stories here, but I was just stunned that he said that out loud. Next story. My boss called into the site I was managing. I had a bit of a cold, pre-COVID, but I felt well enough. She asked to speak to Lois, the shop manager. Lois was feeling pretty badly and was only working inventory to keep off of the main sales floor. After talking to me and Lois, she asked to speak with Missy, the office manager. Missy had the same cold that was going around, but she had come in to do payroll so we could all get paid. Bless her. After the boss had spoken to everyone, she was transferred back to me. I asked if she was going to come in that afternoon, and she responded, "No, you all sound ill. I'll be in next week. Feel better." Yes, my boss called in well. Next story. Where to start? When you start your first proper job, I've worked in numerous roles including management prior to starting this role for over 10 years. We can't consider reasonable adjustments as it's not fair to your colleagues who aren't disabled. You shouldn't have applied for the job if had disabilities that would make it difficult. After a meeting, I was ambushed where I was working under a different manager as a favor who had lied to cover his own back. I know the team is unhappy and no one wants to be here, but I'm just a manager. What can I do about it? Oh, I don't know. Actually, be a manager. Can't wait to be free. Next story. Me, as the only person in a company of over 15K employees qualified to do my work, following 3 retirements over 4 years, they had yet to backfill. My boss. I don't want you to be on call 24/7. Therefore, we aren't going to pay you to be on call. However, when we call you out of hours on your personal phone, we still expect you to come in. Bonus answer from my machine fixing days. A portal mill was down, waiting for a part to arrive from Germany. It had been shipped. We were ready to fit it when it came, just waiting for it to get across to us. Machine shop manager asked for an email update, which we provided. He then asked us to wait faster. No joke. Next story. I had to take an unexpected medical leave and was gone about a month and a half. During that leave, my supervisor actually emailed me and asked if I could take an intermittent leave of absence instead, since no one knew how to do my job. So, I knew that my team was struggling with taking over my tasks while I was out. I denied her request as my doctor stated and noted that I could not work at all during that time. When I went back to work, everything was either completed incorrectly or not at all. During my check-in with my supervisor, she asked me why I was completing my tasks past the due date. I was on medical leave. Next story. I was having a conversation with my director on how I will be managing things as a junior officer from next week onwards, as both the manager and senior officer of my team handed in their notice, and I will basically have to do 3 people's jobs. After going through a long list of tasks and responsibilities I will have to take on, while she will take on 1 or 2 small tasks. We split the work. I said jokingly, or instead I could just open the window and go. And her reply was, "Well, we're only on the 4th floor. It wouldn't kill you." I quit a few weeks later, thankfully. Next story. At the time it wasn't hilarious. Now it is. My boss admonished me in my annual review that you need to be more careful using your paid sick time and save it up, so you have enough for when you get pregnant. Facts. I had just returned from a surgical leave, which is why I had no paid sick time left. I had never once mentioned pregnancy in the history of my 24 years of life, let alone the 2 years I had worked for this man. HR was my next stop the following day, and they assured me, "Boss man, just looking out for you." I was free from that hellhole about, ironically, 9 months later. Next story. My boss, an attorney, was in his early 70s and couldn't even turn on his computer. He loved sarcasm, and everyone thought he was so funny. I was way overqualified for this job, but it was within walking distance, so I took it. One day he said to me, "Don't forget you're still on probation." I replied, "So are you." He was so rude to me in the name of just joking around. No one was laughing when I walked in, deleted the cheat sheet spreadsheet I had been compiling for a year of all attorneys and judges' contact information and templates, grabbed my coffee mug, and walked. Idiot. Next story. There was too much pressure on a production team to meet an arbitrarily created deadline. I asked what the consequences of missing that deadline were. An executive's response was, "What do you want me to say?" My response was, "Say what the consequences are," to which there was no response. Epilogue. The deadline was not met, and the world still turned several years later. I read later on that the "what do you want me to say" is a management tactic to shut someone up. Apparently, my response was supposed to be, "You're right, boss. Keep on leading like the pro you are." Next story. Toxic work environment, family business. Boss says, "A monkey could do your job." Turns out that no, a monkey could not do my job, which we learned by having some 20-something nitwit hired to replace me as I was promoted to a different department. Needless to say, after we let her go, I did my old job and my new job for the next 8 months, until we found a suitable replacement who had a brain. He also asked me one day if I'd forgotten my helmet. Like, seriously? So many more that I could get into. But end of the story, I am so glad I'm not there anymore. Next story. Scene. Multiple short cubicles in a medium-sized office space. Boss pulls me into a conference room to tell me I'm talking too loud during the workday. I resolve to keep conversations to a minimum since my voice obviously irritates him. 1 month later, I'm back in the conference room to be told by same boss that I'm not speaking to my fellow employees nearly enough. Needless to say, I blew up at him and told him to make up his effing mind as to what was the appropriate amount of vocal volume I was permitted to have. Next story. I was working at an asset management company on client billing, and our director was a very energetic and enthusiastic woman, almost in a creepy way. Once she had this idea that why don't we stay overnight one day, can't remember the specifics because it was so unhinged, and work so we could bond like students in universities or in a boot camp. I couldn't believe my ears. Why would anyone think this is a good idea? Everyone has a life outside of the office. We wouldn't have stayed even if they'd paid overtime for that. Next story. We're a family. The guys don't get to leave until their work is done. Tardies that get paid hourly. We, her and hubby, owners of the small business, work late all the time. You guys also need to make sure all the work is done before you leave. No overtime offered to us office staff. She would also brag about her shopping outings, saying she set herself a limit of $1,000, but accidentally went over it. Oops. And then claim most of it on tax. Meanwhile, we were paid peanuts. Never working for a small business again. Next story. We all had separate cell phones for work. One time I heard my work phone ring while I was in the bathroom, and then immediately after that my private cell phone rang. There literally wasn't even a minute between the two calls. It was my manager both times. Obviously, I could not pick up, so I called him back a few minutes later when I got out of the bathroom. He asked me why I wouldn't answer, and I told him I was in the bathroom. Then he said, "But I called your other number too." Like? Next story. Manager. If we post safety signs up, we'll have to start enforcing people use their PPE. If OSHA walks through and sees them not wearing it, but they see the signs, we could get fined. So let's hold off putting up the signs, because if they don't see a sign, there won't be something to fine. The entire room was sitting there stunned at the level of stupidity. The logistics person ordered the signs for me, and I had them up a couple days later. Next story. Boring office job managing a team of 12 people, also all 100% office-based. Global brand with 10K employees. Me. Transitioning to using a wheelchair in the office as my progressive disability has worsened, and I now need to. Boss. I can't see how you can possibly do this job in a wheelchair. Any job, actually. Is this really your plan? What the heck? Yeah, let's try a pip, shall we? Here's your pip. What the heck? Next story. Boss calls me late at night at home in a panic. I'm locked in the office and I can't get out. I nearly fell over laughing. Instead of telling him to turn the deadbolt, I had a bit of fun with him. I said, "Remember the door we used to use?" He says, "Yes." I said, "Set the alarm. Run to the door and open it. Then, lock the door behind you." He kept me on the phone while he did this. He thanked me profusely. What an idiot. Next story. Backstory. I, 33-year-old female, was diagnosed in adulthood with stress-induced epilepsy while working full-time. Had to take leave a couple times after it all started. Finally came back to work, but because of everything, had to pull back on some responsibilities. Used to be a high performer, i.e., overworked myself to get the job of 3 people done. Boss says to me one day after a few weeks of being back, "I miss the old you." Next story. Right at the start of COVID, a manager told us on a team call that COVID had been really difficult for her because all her kids were quarantining in her different homes around the country. Really? You're running a team meeting with 40+ people barely making ends meet, and your big struggle is having too many houses. And why, if you're paid enough to have all these houses, why aren't your employees paid better? Next story. I received a phone call at work that I knew my boss would want to hear about. When I hung up, I stood up and left my office to walk over to his. I almost immediately ran into him in the hallway and told him about the phone call I had just received. He was furious, demanding that I tell him these things sooner. His face was red, he was so angry. I was like, there is no way I could have told you faster. Next story. Not nearly as bad as some of the others, but our VP was helping me pack some supplies, and I love fitting a lot of stuff into a small space. So offhandedly I quipped, I love playing Tetris. He glances up at me and says, what's that? I blinked. Tetris? Yeah, what is that? I was stunned. I was at such a loss for words, I stumbled through the least helpful description of the game. Next story. Previous job where they were trying to work people with master's degrees part-time for $12 an hour. I don't understand why everyone's so focused on how much they get paid. Because we don't all have trust funds, Janice. Boy. Current job. Out of the blue during a team meeting. You guys know HR's not your friend, right? No one should go to HR. Call for you. It's your guilty conscience. Next story. We can't adjust your work schedule because then Betty would be working alone in the building for the last hour of the day. I'm scheduled to leave a half hour earlier than her every day the way my schedule is now. So she's already alone for the last half hour of the day. Well, that's not the only reason we can't change your schedule. That shouldn't be any of the reason. Next story. But really, we said they didn't have to come in during the freak blizzard where 3 different employees got hospitalized because of ice-related incidents. Oh, but also, you're not getting paid, obviously, and you'll lose your bonus. And we can only provide these other benefits if you work so many hours. But it's not our fault you totaled your car and ended up in the ICU. Next story. I asked for a dime raise at a job in the late 80s. I was replacing a very experienced worker in a production facility. He leaned back and said, X and X was around before you and will be around long after you. Refused my raise, which would have been about $5 per week. I quit on the spot and only learned a couple years later that he was fired for that. He was the owner's son. Next story. When I was a teenager, I worked in a pizza restaurant. Friday, around 5 p.m., the orders roll from the printer to the ground. A couple of colleagues and I have both ovens full front to back, with more laying ready and making more. Boss comes back and tells us, you guys are slow. I almost walked out on him, but a very good colleague calmed me down. He never improved. Oh well. Next story. My colleagues and I get on well in our open office, while my boss has an equally sized space with a door to herself. While 2 of us were out of office, she said to the one remaining, I like this. Confused, colleague asked, the silence? It's usually like this. Her response? No, there's usually laughing. And people told me I was out of pocket calling her Miss Hannigan. Next story. My aunt was trying to establish a room/space for nursing mothers to use at the base where she worked. Her boss was vehemently denying the requests. When she started to ask questions about why he didn't want to approve the space, he told her, babies shouldn't be brought into the workplace. She then got to explain breast pumps to her 50-something high-ranking military boss. Next story. It wasn't to me, but I worked for a 2 company that was family-owned. The old man walked in one day and told the receptionist who had worked there for 20+ years that she was too ugly to work there and fired her on the spot. He would come down the hall hacking like he was going to spit something out, and my coworker and I would hide under our desks until he left. Next story. Regardless of size or number, you should be able to finish any project in an hour, new jerk manager. And yes, when I quit, he apparently asked one of my coworkers if he put them to my last project if they could finish it in an hour, and my coworker laughed and said they'd be lucky to have it done at the end of the 12-hour shift. I asked for 6 hours. Next story. There's the boss who told everyone I broke the school's laminator on my day off. Not that everyone else knew my work schedule, but she certainly did. There's the college professor who asked me, when the schedule for her assigned project conflicted with my work schedule, why I worked anyway. I just looked at her and said, so I can eat? Next story. A potential boss. During an interview for an assistant position to the interviewer, he said he likes his assistants to be like trash cans into which he can throw his trash, and he gestured throwing trash. Wow. The whole interview and the time before it, waiting, was bonkers. The person who recommended me for the role apologized when I told him. Next story. A client texted for my bank info for payment. I emailed him my routing and account number. He replied, "You're killing me. Never send bank info in an email." Ugh. Like that information isn't in the hands of anyone who's ever received a check from me. Speaking of checks, that banking genius is currently 90 days late with said payment. Next story. Even though integrity is one of the pillars of the company mission, it doesn't count because we can't count it. I am a certified nurse midwife, and this was in regard to patient safety. Misdescribed negative attitude for reporting very serious near misses for review. Several deaths and many harms since I resigned, with no bad outcomes. Next story. So, I'm the only one at my hospital who does my job. My manager, these 3 house patients need to be seen. Me. I have a full outpatient schedule from 8 to 5. Her. The outpatients can wait. Me. 3 hours? Who should they call to complain about that? Her. I'll get back to you on that. Me. Waiting. No answer. No reply. Next story. Manager at Walmart said I had to clock out, minimum of half an hour, for the extra 10 minutes I needed on my single 15-minute break to pump breast milk for my baby. HR woman laughed, rolled her eyes, and said not to do that. Then there was a class action suit against Walmart for discrimination against pregnant women. Next story. I was a newspaper crime reporter in the 1980s and early 90s. Call came over the scanner. 2 men exchanging gunfire about 2 blocks away from the office. My editor turned to me. Go and don't get shot. For a split second I thought, that's the first time she's ever expressed concern. Then she added, "You're on deadline." Next story. On a conference call with an entire group and someone, probably her in a corporate conference room, put a phone on hold and everyone could hear hold music and she said, "Whoever has us on hold, please hang up and dial back in." Someone reminded the imbecile that as they were on hold, they couldn't hear her ignorant ass. Next story. If you don't work overtime, start looking for another job. Not said to me, said by coworker who's worked there for 10+ years to a new hire. Luckily, our company has gone through some change where overtime isn't expected anymore, so his thought isn't true, but still a crazy thing to say to a new hire.